Um, the League of Women Voters, as I said, is a trusted nonpartisan organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. Before we start, as a matter of courtesy, would everyone please turn off all electronic devices? I was once in a church and they said, turn them off or God will know. So turn them off or the League will know. Please be aware that unauthorized videos are not allowed tonight. K-Top will be videoing this session. And the reason that unauthorized videos are not allowed is because the FCC requires that a debate or forum must not be edited and must be broadcast in its entirety. This means that no candidate may use or edit footage for campaign purposes, no matter how it is obtained. Also, campaign literature and other forms of campaigning are not permitted in this room, and I'd like to remind everyone that the present candidates have all agreed to participate under these guidelines. And so tonight we are sponsoring the first forum. We're going to have 3. The first forum will be for Bart Director for District 3. And so I would like to introduce Anthony Pegram, Rebecca Saltzman, and Fred Wright-Lopez. I just want to now go over the ground rules. The timekeepers will signal candidates in 2 ways, with colored signs and with a bell tonight, and they'll mark 30 seconds, a dash at 15 seconds, and then stop. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes for opening remarks, and we starting with Mr. Pegram. And so let me see if there's anything else that I need to tell you. What we will do then is we will ask questions, and as there are 3 candidates, each person will get a chance to answer that question. And so there will be no rebuttals, and following the questions, each candidate will be allowed 1 minute for a closing remark. So, Mr. Pegram, let's start with you.
First, let me thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity, and I know this organization has always been the forefront of getting the word out to the public, and I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this. My name is Anthony Pegram. I am running for the District 3 seat Bart Board. I'm a licensed engineer. I have a master's degree in business administration. I've been a Bart employee for over 20 years, and in that role I've worked on many of Bart's larger projects, including the San Francisco and Oakland Airport extension, currently working with the East Costa County extension, and rail car procurements and other such projects. I also have 25 years of experience serving in various boards and commissions for the City of Oakland, including the Landmarks Board, Planning Commission. I've sat at this for several years, sitting at this this forum, and also the Base Reuse Authority, and I'm currently on the the Alameda County Fair Board. And as a Bart director, I will make sure that we have established policies that are fiscally sound. I will make safety a priority and cleanliness of the fleet, and make sure that our elevators and escalators and other equipment that's required for access and use of the facility are kept up to date. I will also ensure that the accessibility, any issues of accessibility are addressed so that there would be no barriers, not unnecessary barriers to entering and using BART. My long-term strategy would focus on optimizing the utilization of BART's resources, and I would bring forth programs such as continuing transit-oriented development and overall cost savings efforts to improve the financial picture.
Okay. Rebecca Saltzman.
First of all, thank you so much to the League for organizing this. It's a great opportunity. My name is Rebecca Saltzman. I'm a longtime environmental and transportation advocate, and that's why I'm so excited to be running for the BART Board of Directors. I'm currently the Government Affairs Manager for the California League of Conservation Voters. We're actually holding a forum upstairs tonight. And at the California League of Conservation Voters, I work to pass state laws to protect our environment and transportation systems. And I'm also the vice chair of the Oakland Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And BART's very important to me as a BART rider, but also to the Bay Area environment and the economy. And I think we saw how important BART was a few months back when there was the fire near the West Oakland station and the Transbay Tube was shut down. And whether you're a BART rider or not, you probably saw the impacts of that. There was terrible traffic, buses were late or didn't show up. Maybe you didn't get stuck in the traffic, but your coworker didn't show up at time to work. I know that happened to me. So we saw that it's very important to our area. But we can't take for granted that it will always be as reliable as it is. Right now, BART's in a crisis. BART has a $7.5 billion unfunded maintenance liability. And that's everything from the trains to the tracks to the computer systems to the stations. And that would be my #1 priority, is addressing this issue. We have to maintain the BART system or it's not going to be as reliable and we're going to lose BART ridership. So that would be my focus. Some of the other things I would focus on are working more closely with AC Transit and making BART more accountable to the public and making the meetings more open to the public. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Wright Lopez?
Good evening. I wish to thank the League for sponsoring this event, and I wish to also thank my two colleagues, Mr. Pegram and Ms. Saltzman, for their participation in this campaign. They have both been extremely courteous to me and have demonstrated their knowledge and sincere desire to improve the BART system. I'm an attorney by training. I attended UC Berkeley Law School and UCLA and UC Berkeley, both as an undergraduate. My first job out of law school was with the Civil Rights Office in Washington and in San Francisco. I spent most of my career in federal law enforcement around the country and around the world until approximately 10 years ago an injury took my vision and left me blind. Since I lost my eyesight some 10 years ago, I've devoted myself to the issue of representing seniors and disabled individuals and individuals with special needs in need of public transit and paratransit. I've done advocacy work on behalf of these individuals. I've also participated in local community transportation activities in Contra Costa County and in, more recently, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. I am motivated to run because of 3 issues: crime, grime, and lack of accessibility of BART. Crime is overrun in BART, and we need to control it. The stations are dirty and some are filthy, and there is total almost lack of accessibility in many of the BART stations. And despite 40 years of promises, that has not fulfilled the promise of accessibility. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. And the first question: why do people with Muni passes in San Francisco get to ride BART for free? It seems unfair. Let's start with you, Mr. Pegram.
The BART's fare policy is really something that has been established over many years of really looking at the needs of the district. And I don't know that I have a good answer for that, to be honest with you. I'll just put it that way.
Okay. Rebecca?
So as I understand it, it's not that you get a Muni pass and you can just ride the whole BART system for free. It's the few downtown stations. And from what I've heard from San Franciscans is it has to do with Muni service planning and not wanting to run so many buses along those major routes. I think the more important question to ask is, why don't we have something similar here in the East Bay? And something I would advocate for is a combined AC Transit and BART fare. People don't just show up at BART stations. They have to get there. I don't live right next to BART, so I usually take an AC Transit bus to get to a BART station. And we have to think about making those fares accessible to people, especially some riders who are taking AC Transit to BART and then maybe to Muni. So I'd look at it and say, how can East Bay Transit work better, and how can our agencies work better together?
Mr. Lopez?
I am opposed to the free rides that are currently being provided, be they on Muni or be they provided by BART. Currently, BART employees, all BART employees, ride for free, as does their family members, family defined broadly. I think this constitutes a gift, an impermissible gift of public taxpayer dollars that should be stopped immediately. I think it is unfair when we have rising fare costs that we give these rides away for free.
All right. Next question. What will it take to have BART trains running past midnight? And what will you do to improve late-night transit options? And Mr. Lopez, let's start with you.
I think the first problem is finding the revenues in order to provide the additional service and to be able to provide the scheduled maintenance that is so vitally necessary. Would certainly be desirable to have BART running past its current cutoff time. I'm not, however, fully convinced that the revenues are in fact there. What I'm more concerned about is in the late night running is the increasing crime that is being experienced by individuals who are transiting on BART late in the evening.
All right. Rebecca?
Late night BART service is very important to me, and it's part of my platform. I think the Bay Area deserves to have at least late night BART service on the weekends, on Friday and Saturday evenings. Some exciting news came out a few months ago. Los Angeles, their subway system started running till 2 a.m. every Friday and Saturday night, and it's been successful. So I think we need to look to what LA is doing, because there's no reason our transit shouldn't be as good here as it is in Los Angeles. There are some issues with making sure there's time for maintenance at night, but I think we can get around those. LA is a very similar single-track system to ours, so we need to look at what they're doing and figure it out. Obviously, we need to test it to make sure the ridership was there, but from how often on the campaign trail I get this question, I think the demand is there.
Okay. Mr. Pegram?
The initial design of BART really relied principally on maintaining some very high-tech equipment. And right now, the main reason for the shutdown, which everybody probably realizes, is that this maintenance has to be done through at some period of time. I think we can obviously extend, and BART has extended the time, later time frames in terms of where the need is apparent. But in order to really make that an ongoing effort, it would really require some significant changes to the way the BART system is set up. I'm not saying it's not feasible. It is feasible. It would be a pretty significant cost to construct either a bypass track or to be able to have some other means of support services through that period of time. But in the current state, it could be done on a case-by-case basis, but not on as I see it, on a ongoing basis. And I would oppose anything that might sacrifice safety on the system.
Okay. Let's start with Rebecca this time. What is your vision for public transit in the Bay Area 20 years from now? What would you do to advance this vision?
So my vision in 20 years is that it will be really easy for the vast majority of people in the Bay Area to get around, to get to their jobs, to get to their errands on public transit. For some people right now, that's possible, but not for everybody. And I think as gas prices continue to increase, and as we need to deal with increases in greenhouse gas emissions, we need to make public transit more accessible. I think that it is crucial that BART work with the other transit agencies. BART is never going to be on every block. So we need to figure out ways that we can better connect BART with the bus services that are already there, and help figure out ways to support AC Transit and some of the other agencies to make sure that fares are low enough and that service goes where people need it to go.
Okay, Mr. Pegram?
I would envision the transportation system in the area as one where all of the particular individual agencies have worked out a system where the schedules are well coordinated, where BART can function in its best as it functions best as a backbone of the system, carrying large numbers of people over longer distances and delivering them to a point where feeder services would then get these people to where they need to go. And also, it would accommodate the various modes of transportation, not only auto and bus, but we have bicyclists and skateboarders and pedestrians that also need to be considered. And with the infill of many, the transit-oriented development would in itself promote less need for use of cars getting from work to point, because we would have those facilities at the transit nodes.
Okay. Mr. Lopez?
My first response is to say that what we most need is consolidation of existing transit agencies. We have far too many existing transit agencies that are overlapping, and we have too much waste of financial dollars. We could consolidate many of them, and the first thing I would consolidate is paratransit so that we have one single paratransit provider for the Bay Area. It's a shame that we treat our seniors and disabled individuals by handing them off often 2, 3, and 4 times just to get to a medical appointment, because each paratransit agency has its own rules.
All right. Let's start with you again, Mr. Lopez. How can we make, I'm sorry, did I get everybody? I think I did. How can we make public transit not just barely adequate for people who have no other choice, but attractive to people who do have a choice?
I think first you begin with transparency. It disturbs me that right now you can go onto BART's website and find out what the train schedule is, but you can't go on and find out about the crime rate. For some reason, BART doesn't want to post that. I think transparency. I think riders want to know whether it's safe to go to certain areas and what time it might be safe. I believe that this would attract more individuals if they were fully armed with planning information. I also believe, thank you.
You have 30 seconds. 30 seconds.
I'm through.
Okay. Next then, Anthony.
Well, I believe that what a system like BART or any transit agency could offer would be certain value for the dollars that are spent. And I think that one of the values that BART can offer is that one of saving time, as opposed to driving a car. BART offers the opportunity of getting to the station and saving parking fees, saving reducing greenhouse gases for those who are really concerned about that, which is a major issue. So I believe that we need to make sure that we can serve as a network, that we can serve places, outlying areas. And I think that that will call for working with other agencies in terms of, for instance, AC Transit, the bus rapid transit, to make sure we coordinate those kinds of activities on a regional basis, so that people can get from point A to point B using the system and not have to rely on a private auto.
Okay. Ms. Salzman.
I think when thinking about people who are making a choice to ride transit, they own a car, they have the ability to drive it, you have to make BART, easier for them, just as fast for them, more convenient for them. And some important things to this is continuing the reliability. BART is pretty reliable, but I mentioned in my opening the maintenance issues, and it becomes less reliable, we're not going to be able to attract riders. I think frequent service is probably the biggest complaint I hear about, especially on particular lines where sometimes you're waiting 20 minutes for a BART train if you just missed it. So making it frequent enough where you can show up and know that your train will be there in a reasonable amount of time. That's important for people who are used to the convenience of their cars. I also want to reiterate better connections is very important through buses, walking, biking. We need to make it really easy for people to get there. And safety is also very important, and that can be addressed in many ways with lighting, police, more people around.
Thank you. It is difficult to hear the next stop announcements on BART trains. Any suggestions to improve this situation? Let's start with Anthony.
Well, there definitely can be an improvement in the system throughout the stations. And with the newer cars that are coming online, that's one of the things that's really being looked at closely. And there have been efforts to improve it, but it just needs to be not only improved from just the audio version, but there needs to be other visual, possibly screens that also provide the destination information, and more information conceivably displayed on the cars as they approach. But there has to be, it's not adequate, and with all the background noise you get in the BART station, there needs to be improvements. And there are different technologies that can be looked at for that purpose.
Okay. Ms. Saltzman?
I think that's a very important issue and something I've seen other transit agencies do a lot better. I am excited about the opportunity with the new train cars that BART is in the process of ordering. There have been some designs put out, but no final decision has been made. So if I was on the BART board, this is something I'd be a part of making a decision on. And I think having the pre-recorded announcements, which is being considered, is important, and having the displayed announcements as well so people can either see them or hear them. The other thing I think we should consider is having announcements in other languages. Lots of big cities have this, and we have people in the Bay Area either who live here or who are visiting, coming from the airport that don't speak English. So I think we should look into announcements in other languages.
Okay. Mr. Lopez?
In my campaign, I've offered two solutions to this problem. First is one that's already been mentioned and is used in the metro system and in other transit systems, and that is automated announcements, arrival and departure announcements, as opposed to having the train operator do it. This would be a far superior way. And we need to do them in multilingual languages. We're the Bay Area. We're host to so many different tourists from around the country, and so host to so many different residents who speak different languages. It just should be automatic. The second I've offered is a solution to have plug-in posts at each of the stations on the platforms, where if you had your earbuds, as so many people seem to have today, you could plug in and hear the announcements. You could plug in and recharge your device. You could plug in and hear the overhead signs that the blind and visually impaired can't see now.
Thank you. All right, let's start with Rebecca. And this question is, what plans do you have to increase BART's DBE, which is Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, and MBE, Minority Business Enterprise, utilization on its contracts?
So I think BART has been making progress in its contracting, and I'm happy to see the new general manager focusing on this quite a bit. What I've heard from various communities, the Latino community, the African American community, is they feel like they're participating in the process, trying to get these contracts, and have been unable to. Something that I think would be very helpful is to try to break more of the contracts up into smaller pieces. And this gives an advantage to all sorts of businesses, particularly small businesses. This gives more people an opportunity to bid. The other important thing is not to just reach out to various communities and let them know about these opportunities, but we need to make sure they know how to be competitive in the bidding process. Again, I think there have been some steps forward, but we need to continue those.
Mr. Pegram?
Well, the problem is actually somewhat twofold in that going through the procurement process, there are certain requirements that will go into procurement contracts, and Bart needs to reinforce those requirements so that the staff has more enforcement capability. Many of the requirements, the way they're written, we've had situations where a recommendation comes to the board and the board does not accept it because it's not an agreement that it has reached the level of participation that the board wants to see. So we need to reinforce those rules. And the other side of it is that once a DBE, MBE firm, WBE firm gets the work, there needs to be tougher enforcement in terms of making sure that they are actually utilized, that they actually get paid, because that's really been another situation that has existed, and those requirements need to be reinforced. We need to have a more policing power to make sure that happens, because it has not reached the satisfaction of the many.
Mr. Lopez?
I believe the current general manager has made significant steps in dealing with the issue of relationships with minority and women-owned businesses, solidifying those relationships, and offering the hope for better opportunities, more opportunities relative to contracting. I believe that one of the solutions to improving contracting in this area is to perhaps provide some measure of additional scoring points for joint venturing with minority and disadvantaged and women-owned businesses, so as to make them more viable partners.
All right, thank you. And the next question, we will start with Mr. Pegram. What BART extensions do you support, and how should they be paid for? Have you ever been against a BART extension?
I personally have worked on several BART extensions. The San Francisco Airport extension, the Oakland Airport extension, and I'm currently working on also the East Contra Costa. In terms of the importance of these extensions in the overall role of BART in developing and being in a position to support the economic growth of the Bay Area, I am for these extensions. The funding for many of these have come about by BART being able to leverage the funds that we have here locally and going and seeking funds from federal sources to make these things happen now at a time when it's critical to the economy. The Bay Area economy has been ranked as up to 20 of the world, number 20 in the world. I think an important part of that is to have a well-developed transportation system, and I think it's important that we take advantage of the dollars where they are, and so I support the expansions that BART has taken.
Okay. Mr. Lopez. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Mr. Lopez.
I am in favor of the continued extension of BART into other areas around the San Francisco Bay Area. I believe one of the greatest mistakes BART made was when it stopped extending service. I'm a resident of Contra Costa County, and I am very disappointed that the residents of far eastern Contra Costa County, who have paid into this system for well over 40 years in terms of their tax dollars, have not seen the benefit of that BART system. I think we need to move to the Silicon Valley in order to keep the engine of economic growth and activity going for the overall Bay Area. And I believe that the extension to Livermore was a wise move on the part of BART.
Rebecca?
So I think when we look at extensions, it's important not to just think, do we support or oppose, but to look at each extension individually and not to just consider the upfront capital costs, which often are covered by federal, state, regional grants, but to think about the operating costs and the maintenance costs as well. As I said in my opening, BART has a really big maintenance problem right now, $7.5 billion. And I think we need to focus on that. And if extensions are going to make that problem even bigger, that's something we really need to consider. One project that I had specific concerns about and voiced this publicly was the Oakland Airport connector. I go to the Oakland Airport often and take BART, and I think there should be something, but a group of us advocated for something like a bus rapid transit or light rail. The current project costs almost $500 million. It doesn't have intermediate stops and is going to be the same speed or slower than the current bus. So we really have to think about these trade-offs when planning.
Right. Thank you. We'll start then with Mr. Lopez. BART's current fare structure forces urban riders, who are generally less wealthy, to subsidize the fares of wealthier suburban riders. What can be done to make BART's fare structure more equitable?
I believe that the current fare structure seeks to provide a balance. I'm a frequent user. I'm dependent upon BART, obviously, since I'm blind and don't drive. I'm a beneficiary of a discount for seniors and disabled individuals, and that provides me with great relief. I think that we need to continue that type of program and those types of efforts. I'm not necessarily in favor of altering the current fare structure system, and would keep the current fare structure system in place.
Ms. Saltzman?
I think since BART is such a big system geographically with so many miles, we have to think about the reality of all the riders. And this district, District 3, has, I guess, what some people would think as more urban areas and more suburban areas in two different counties. And we have to think about the people who are taking BART every day to work, and we need to make sure their fares are reasonable no matter whether they're coming from Oakland or from Lafayette or wherever they're coming from. But I do think I'd be open to looking at the fare structure, and I particularly, again, want to look at those people who are taking BART every day and looking at their costs, not just in the BART ride, but in their connections and how they're getting there. So maybe we incentivize bike riding to stations, maybe there's something more BART can do with shuttles to BART stations, and maybe there are some combined fares that can be looked at with other transit agencies.
As mentioned, BART does have a problem, existing problem in terms of covering its maintenance costs. So I would say that the fare structure, it's important to look at the fare structure, but it's important also to be sure that we maintain a level of revenue. Now, that's not to say that that there are not some improvements that can be made. I think there's a lot of disparities in the various systems in terms of the transportation system we have. There are the possibility, I would look at the possibility of some sort of a tiered fare structure that would really work toward reducing the congestion in the mornings. Also, even a flat fare at some time during the day, so that people who are just doing a local travel would have an opportunity to do it at a more, if they're doing it regularly, local workers, lower income. And also, it's important that this be coordinated among the various transit operators. So I would be in favor of really taking a long look at revising the fare structure.
All right. This time we'll start with Ms. Saltzman. And what are what you consider the two most significant challenges facing BART, and how would you address them?
The two biggest challenges, I think the first challenge is the big maintenance problem, and I might sound like a broken record by now, but this is really my number one priority. That $7.5 billion maintenance liability is very important, and we have to address that. Again, I think we need to look at our priorities with funding, but we also have to aggressively go after funding at the federal, state, and regional level, specifically for maintenance. BART has been very competitive with its funding requests, but think Bart needs to ask for more money for maintenance issues. The second issue that I think we're really running into right now is the congestion, particularly at the commute hours. Bart is close to at capacity in the commute hours and is running every single train it has, or the other cars are in maintenance. So we need to figure out some creative solutions to work around that. I don't think there's a silver bullet solution, but that's something I'd be looking at closely.
Mr. Lopez.
The two biggest problems, I think, facing BART currently, and the one that most riders worry about every time they get on the train, is crime. Crime and accessibility for the disabled. Crime because it is increasing so dramatically throughout the system, and the force level, the BART police force level, is at its lowest point. It's 206 sworn officers. It's down to about 171. I believe that the issue of crime is very prevalent on the minds of riders throughout who worry about getting home safe and having their car there when they get there and not stolen. I think accessibility for seniors and disabled, given the aging population, is something that seriously needs to be addressed and has been ignored decade after decade by BART.
Mr. Pegram.
First of all, I would like to say that yeah, there is a maintenance issue with BART, and that has to be faced, but it's not really just BART's issue. The region as a whole is really looking at, I believe, a figure of $30 billion in terms of unfunded maintenance over the next 30 years. So that's really a problem that all agencies will have to face. But I have to agree with Mr. Lopez that the most immediate issues would be with safety, because we've got to get people riding BART. People have to be safe, and if you get the ridership, then you can address the issues of maintenance costs. And in terms of that, I would propose having additional what I call community resource officers, people who would be extra eyes and ears on the trains, really to make people feel more safe, like we see it in the city of Oakland, and it has an impact. Also, I agree that accessibility and adapting to the needs, there's a great change in the demographics. The elderly baby boomers now, we're getting a little, other requirements. There are skateboarders, there are bicyclists, there are pedestrians. So we need to be able to accommodate all that in order to maximize BART's potential as a transport agency.
All right. The next question, and we will start with Mr. Lopez. Creating transit-oriented development will have a big impact on the built environment and thereafter the community. Having a $7.5 billion need for maintenance will require some serious fiscal decisions. As a public agency, how do you intend to increase the citizens' access to information and input and the decision-making?
I think that with regards to the issue of transit villages, I fully support the concept. I particularly see it as viable in both more urban and more suburban areas. In District 3, areas such as San Leandro, and in areas such as Lafayette, BART Station, where there's substantial parking area that I think can be devoted to that. But I think one needs to involve the local business entities, the local government, the elected city council members, as well as the local residents in that process.
Okay, Mr. Pegram.
Well, a few things there. I think there's some issues. Transit development, the $7.5 billion, the public input, those three. First of all, on transit-oriented development, I think it's necessary for BART to optimize those availabilities. There are definitely advantages to being able to utilize its property and develop a long-term stream of income to address some of the issues on the unfunded liability. The public input is important that these projects, and in any projects that we do, and there's input from the various municipalities, and there should definitely be public hearings around any of these projects, and those hearings would have to look at the financial impact of these projects before we make a decision on a transit-oriented development, we need to make sure that it's sound, and that's, you know, something that would be necessary. So I think that's the way we could put those three together, that you know, we would go forward on those transit-oriented development projects that make sense on the long run, and then we can show they'll contribute to Bart's financial problems.
Okay. Ms. Salzman?
So creating more access and generating more input from the public is very important to me. I've been a transit advocate, so I've advocated at BART board meetings, and it's not the easiest process for anybody to get into. The BART board meets at 9 a.m. on Thursday mornings. The agendas aren't always so easy to understand. And something I think that's a huge opportunity is BART has a fantastic communications department. And BART does a very good job of informing the public of decisions after they're made and of big projects after they're already moving forward. We all know about, you know, the train cars and things like that once the decisions have been made. But I want to use that communications department to get the public involved before the decisions have been made. I think projects can almost always be improved when we get the input from the public. One area that would be very important is in the transit-oriented development projects. I think we need to get input from the local communities, the local councils, the local chambers of commerce to make sure these projects work for the community.
All right. The next question, we'll start with Mr. Lopez. How do you plan to change BART's negative image among young African American males?
I think you change the image by becoming engaged, by making linkages and partnerships. One of the things that I advocate for BART in this regard is the use of what we refer to today as smart media. Right now, the interaction with BART is one way. You go on the BART website, you look at their planning, your planning trip. There is no application for individuals to provide information to BART about crime, about suspicious activity, to express concerns about the cleanliness of restrooms, about the cleanliness of stations and trains. I think one way to engage everybody in the process in a partnership is to have them utilize social media, be it texting or tweeting or emailing, to better reach out and establish that linkage and partnership.
Mr. Pegram.
Let me say that on my first day working for BART, first week, I had a situation where my son was detained by BART police officers, and I remember going to the chief of police at that time and trying to figure out what was happening. And from that time, I definitely feel that, you know, as a corporate citizen, I think BART has been just has failed in terms of putting itself or establishing itself as a positive image in the community where it resides. I think there are a lot of things that have to be done, and I would definitely look toward, as a board member, having BART sponsor more community-oriented projects, so that one thing we need to be able to draw upon more of our local people, particularly in our lower income and the minorities, as employees. And I've seen so many situations where employees, they come to apply for BART jobs and they don't pass the test. Well, I think that, you know, BART needs to look at that and find out, you know, maybe there's something that BART can do in terms of working with, there are many organizations in the area. And I think that's the only way that I see BART changing its image, not only among the African Americans, but in the community in general, and being a good corporate citizen of the Bay Area.
Okay, Ms. Salzman?
I think this is very important, especially in the past several years. BART has had a huge problem with its image, and there are a lot of riders who don't feel safe and feel like they're going to be targeted, particularly by the police. I think BART has made some really positive steps forward in the past couple of years, but we need to do a better job reaching out to communities to make sure they know about this and have access to it. One is that they've established a citizen review board for their police department. BART never had that until about a year and a half ago. I think that's fantastic, but we need to make sure community members know about that and know that they have that resource. The other thing that just happened at the beginning of this year is Bart hired an independent police auditor, and they've had, I think, 2 community forums, one in East Oakland, one very recently in Richmond, to introduce this auditor to the community. But this is somebody who will take police complaints and audit them, and he's outside of the police department, so he's really independent. This is a step forward, but again, we need to do a better job communicating it.
Thank you. We'll start this time with Mr. Pegram, and the question is, what, as a patron of the public transit system, what do you like or dislike about your experience?
Well, the many things that we've talked about, just the appearance of the stations it's not very inviting. There are some stations where you really don't even want to touch anything there. I think we need to clean that up. We need to, and I would promote a program where we go through the entire system and really do a cleanup from top to bottom, and also promote more ongoing public awareness of the need to keep BART clean. That would probably be one of the biggest things. Also, it would be a little concerned in terms of at night. There's some areas that where lighting could be improved. There are areas that are pretty much isolated, and I would in some of those areas I feel a little uncomfortable about riding the system, and that's pretty much.
Okay, Ms. Salzman.
There are a couple things I really love about BART. One is the reliability. Usually, if your train's supposed to come at a certain time, it comes. There are obviously problems, but overall, it's a very reliable system. The other thing I love that BART has embraced is open sourcing the data. BART has made its both its schedules and its actual arrival time open source to the community, so many developers have developed various applications for the phone, so I can look on my phone and see when it's arriving, things like that. I think that's been fantastic as a rider and has helped me get around. What I don't like is when I actually get to the station, if I don't know the station well, it's not always so easy to get around. Often if you come out of a BART train, you don't know which way the staircases are. You see an escalator over there, but don't realize it's only a down escalator, so you walk over to it and then realize you can't take it up. So improving the signage in the stations. I also think when you pay for your fare, there should be a sign right there telling you when your BART train is coming, so you don't have to run unnecessarily.
Okay, Mr. Lopez.
What I find most attractive about BART as a rider often is its reliability, the ability to plan a trip, and to get there on time, both for the train arrival and for your arrival at your destination. There are always a few hiccups now and then, but by and large it is a very dependable system. What I find most unattractive is the lack of cleanliness of the station. In many cases, the station's elevators reek of human waste. They need to be cleaned more often. What I find also unattractive are elevators that put the disabled and seniors out in parking lots and not inside stations, and that this continues to be a problem in terms of design and the lack of universal access in that design.
Thank you. We will now have a final statement from each of you, and let's start with Mr. Pegram.
Well, I would just, again, like to thank you for this opportunity. I am prepared to bring, how long are we?
A minute.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm prepared to bring my experience as a board member in many of these commissions to BART, and also combine that with my 20 years with this district. And I'm proud to say that I've been endorsed by our president of the Board of Supervisors, Alameda County, Nate Miley, Federal Glover, supervisor of Contra Costa County, those counties that this district covers, Ignacio de los Fuentes, city councilman, also BART board member Lynette Sweet. And I am prepared really to serve in this capacity, and really look forward to the voters endorsing me as the most important endorsement that I could expect to require.
Okay, Ms. Salzman.
Again, thank you for this opportunity. I think it's been a very informative forum. As a transit advocate and a regular BART rider, I know what it takes to improve BART, and I'm really ready and excited for this potential opportunity to serve on the BART board. I'm honored to be supported by many organizations and people throughout District 3, including the Democratic Party, the Sierra Club, the Alameda County Labor Council, the Black elected officials and faith-based leaders of the East Bay, Senator Lonnie Hancock, Assemblymember Nancy Skinner, the Vice President of the BART Board, Tom Radulovich, and Board Member Robert Rayburn, several AC Transit Board members, and City Council members from throughout the district, including half of the Oakland City Council. I would love to earn the support of the voters in BART District 3 and would be very excited for the opportunity to serve.
Mr. Lopez.
I wish to thank the League again for offering us the opportunity to speak today to the voters of Alameda and Contra Costa County who will be making this most important choice for BART Director of District 3. I believe that my legal, law enforcement, and transportation advocacy background make me the most qualified individual. I believe that my understanding of the needs of current riders is further tempered by my own condition of being blind and riding BART as a disabled individual. I also believe that I hear the voice of riders who are concerned about their daily riding experience and whether they're going to get home safe and whether their car is going to be vandalized or whether they're going to be subject to many of the sexual offenders who inhabit the BART transit system. The first duty of any governmental agency is to provide protection to its residents, and I believe BART is failing in that, and I pledge to do something about that.
Thank you, everyone, and the League would like to remind everyone that you have until October 22nd to register to vote if you have not done that, and thank you very much for being here. We will recess for a few minutes, and then we will have our next forum, which will be with Senator Lonnie Hancock and with her challenger, Mary Claire McElroy. Thank you.